Yeah, welcome to the sixth video of the D4 repertoire series, and this is the first video to deal with black setups starting with knight f6. In this case we'll be talking about the Nimzo-Indian because in order to get the repertoire complete as a whole, it is essential to play second c4 here, as already shown in the previous videos. If you go knight f3, which is perfectly okay from a general point of view, it simply doesn't fit within the repertoire against the Queen's Gambit, and also it won't fit with the suggestions against Benoni and King's Indian setup. So you need to go c4, and then, because we'll be dealing with the Nimzo here, it's e6 of course, and now it's essential really for the whole repertoire to go knight c3. The main point is, if black now switches back to a Queen's Gambit with d5, that you have the exchange variation available as shown in the previous videos. I think this is video 4. Also, if black now switches back to Benoni with c5, we still get the whole range of lines available, involving f4 or f3 or other lines that don't commit a knight to f3. So, of course, most of the time black will go for the Nimzo, and this is no big surprise, because of course the Nimzo-Indian is maybe the most popular way of dealing with 1d4, of course only used in connection with other openings like the Queen's Indian or the Queen's Gambit if white goes knight f3 on move 3 or move 2. It's a very solid defense, so you cannot expect to get a huge opening advantage. But it's still interesting to try to fight the Nimzo well in direct fashion, so to say, because the main idea, of course, of this opening is to at least at the beginning, try to establish some control over e4 with pieces. So the e4 square is now controlled by the knight, so e4 immediately is prevented. Of course, black cannot do without any pawns in the center, but mostly he will delay occupying the pawn with centers to a suitable moment when white has already committed somehow. In connection with the whole repertoire, as mentioned, it is essential to allow the Nimzo, but what you actually play on move 4 is basically, you're free there to choose whatever variation you like, because once you get there, you don't have much transpositional possibilities. The main moves here, the moves that are played most often, are actually Queen c2 and I guess e3, which are perfectly okay. If you like those lines, you can investigate them. Especially Queen c2 might attract people who like to avoid the double pawns on c3, and it's a very popular line, but it's not really fitting into the whole concept of this repertoire, which is basically aimed to take the center and play in an aggressive fashion. With Queen c2, very often white gets behind in development. This is not really serious, but you, so to say, trade long-term factors here for slight short-term problems, because you're not developed very good. For instance, if black castles, a3, bishop takes, queen takes, a line that has become popular recently is d5, and I just want to make a quick example to to get the idea here. If white takes, for instance, which is maybe not the best move, black might go for this, queen c2, ed5, and now black's next move will be c5, bishop f5. Black gets some initiative here. You get the bishop pair in return for white and a healthy structure, but it's not an opening in which you can well, attack black, so to say. You don't have any much aggressive possibilities. So while this is okay if you know what you're doing, I recommend a different approach on move 4, and this move is 4f3, which is a really respectable line, but it's not played that often. But if you look at the players who actually use this move in the past, you get almost the whole list, yeah, the whole top of the ranking list, so to say. You find games of world champion Vishy Anand, or some games by Kramnik, Shirov, or Pavel Elyanov is also a very strong player. He uses this line regularly. The idea of f3, of course, is very direct. It immediately takes care about the e4 square, which is some appeal of this line, I think. So it's really battling black's main idea at the first possible moment. Black really needs to watch out here, because if white gets in to play e4 without any other concessions, it will be simply good for him. Of course, f3 is also a disadvantage. It's not a developing move, and it's also not the nicest move for the knight on g1. But let's have a look at some specific lines. The main move here, it's played really by far, it's by far the most popular option, is d5 by black. But let's take a look first at two other sidelines that are played. First one I'd like to briefly look at is c5. And okay, white advances the pawn and follows up with e4. Just have a quick look at the type of position that might come up if black doesn't take on c3 here. For instance, if he castles, white grabs the center with e4 and continues with knight g2, actually intending to recapture with the knight on c3. And one possibility could be taking on d5, cd5, now b5 to get some play on the queen side, and then white goes knight g3. With further play along the lines of bishop e2, castles, and with some preparation you might go bishop g5 to pin the knight on f6, and maybe even f4 and e5 at some point. It's quite an aggressive setup. White has a nice center with pawns on d5 and e4, and I think white is slightly better here. Therefore black very often captures on c3, and you get a structure which is often looking like this. Of course you have the double pawn, but it's not a pawn that black can attack easily, because the c file is closed. Obviously this position would be entirely different if black's pawn would be on c7 instead of c5, because on c7 he would have chances to play c6 at some point, taking and then pressurizing on the c file. This is not possible here anymore. And here very often you get positions which look a little bit like this. White will get some play on the king side going, and he just has a huge space advantage. I think this kind of position is very difficult for black to play. Might be okay with very exact play, but it's not nice to play. You have such a huge disadvantage in space. This very often happens if black doesn't know really specific theory here. Another option on move 4 is the move castles, actually. And this is the kind of move you'll get by two kinds of players, I think. Very strong ones and rather weak ones, because weak ones don't know what they're doing with this move, and strong ones might have a specific idea. The thing here is, if white plays e4 now, which looks very logical, Actually, this move is a bit problematic. It doesn't have the best reputation at the moment. Maybe there are some ways to improve the play for white, but d5 right now looks very fine for black. The problem actually is that well, white is somewhat underdeveloped. Of course, he just has got the knight out, and all those pieces on the king side are not playing yet. And very often you get positions like e5, knight retreats, and then black goes for a quick f6. And white cannot really deal properly with this because of the bad development. So at this point, actually the correct move at the moment seems to be to play a3 to directly get the bishop. Black of course needs to take. Now b takes, and this is a position which can also arise of course after 4a3, the old Semish variation. But this is a kind of specific form of this, because black has already castled with this. This is actually unusual to do so early. It's possible even in the a3 move order, but it's a bit unusual. And the reason is that at this position exactly here, I think black really needs to play the next move. Otherwise he get problems. Black needs to play knight e8 here. And I think this is a move that I don't know, most, let's say, weaker players wouldn't play. They are more likely to play a move like b6 or c5 or d5, and all these moves, let's for example say b6, can be answered with bishop g5, and this is an absolutely annoying pin, which is very hard to break because black doesn't want to play h6 and g5. And this is almost an automatic game for white to go e4, bishop b3, knight e2, and then f4, castles of course, and this is just an automatic attack. So black needs to retreat here, and then you grab the center with e4. I try to make use of the arrows. Maybe it's a bit much. The general idea here, I just show a couple of moves, is to get an attacking setup like this going. e5, and this is very aggressive towards the king side. Knight may be ready to go to g5, bishop pointing to h7. Of course, it's not all a bed of roses for white, because you see the red marks here. You've got a very bad queen side, so it's double-edged, but it's interesting to play, and I think quite dangerous for black. One thing you need to be aware of, because you might say, okay, this looks very risky. At the moment, a lot of world-class players actually play f3, and it's just a coincidence that nobody tried castles yet. They are absolutely ready to play this position because e4 doesn't seem to be okay right now. So I think this is a fine line. It's a bit risky, but it's not unsound. Of course, the main move on move 4 is d5. Immediately preventing e4, and on this of course white grabs the bishop pair with a3, bishop takes. He can also retreat, but this allows e4. It's a possible line. I won't go into huge detail here, but this seems fine for white. So black takes, and now c5 to get some immediate counterplay. Now white takes on d5, and black recaptures with the knight. This is played most often, but against weaker players mostly you'll also get the recapture of the pawn, and this actually leads to a very well-known structure, which is looking somewhat like this, where white is going for e4, maybe bishop g5 later to put up this pin. This is actually a position similar, or maybe even identical. I think it's identical to a classical game of Botwiniks versus Capablanca. It's a very famous game, I think from 1930s, and it's worth playing over to get an idea of this structure. White is somewhat better here. Okay, knight d5 is the main move, and as the time is running out, I'm still got the limit. It's in the next video.